as I would say, today's format is discussion. So you're invited to participate. You're invited to share your thoughts. I don't propose that I am the expert. It's actually been 2 years since I've been a youth pastor. And so since I've dealt with students like this, so it's not like I'm, oh yeah, I've got all this figured out. Nope, I actually know nothing. And also, just as a special little bonus, we have Rich James who's joined us. He's going to talk a little bit about an upcoming event at the end, but he's also going to generously give us a $25 gift card that somebody is going to win, and Nicole will throw it in a random draw kind of thing for those who participate. So if it wasn't too much stress for Nicole, I'd say every comment gets you one more ballot, but that'd be too stressful. So it's just everybody gets in the draw. All right. So encouraging you to participate, like I said, and Nicole is gonna stop sharing about my birthday. That's fine. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I've kind of broken this down into several categories, and we'll get through whatever we can. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is what you've noticed about the behaviors of junior high students specifically. So what are you noticing about their behaviors through this pandemic and through the season that we're in? Looking at specifically like their habits, their activities, their energy, those kinds of things. What are you noticing that maybe is different than what you saw before, or maybe it's just an acceleration of what you would normally see in a student? First question is always the most awkward. Just feel free to jump in. Raise your hand, jump in, whatever you want. Is this thing on?
I would, first of all, happy birthday, Pastor Wayne.
Thank you.
Had to say it. But I would say something that I've noticed throughout the pandemic is a lot of my younger middle school students were actually really excited about Zoom at the beginning, but then as Zoom started to become a little bit more normalized, and then school became online for a bit there, a lot of them started getting Zoom fatigue, and I know we've talked a lot about that within different circles. And so it was interesting because what was once exciting and then became very, very tiring for them. And so it was interesting to kind of play around with that and find ways to keep engagement high during Zoom calls or other, FaceTime kind of platforms. But yeah, that's definitely something I noticed.
That's good. Yeah. Would anybody echo what's your experience been with your junior high students? Echo, say something different. What do you see?
Yeah, I think with our youth, and I don't know if contextually, if it varies from, small church to mid-sized to large to city church to urban or to rural church areas, but our junior hires, same thing, that they were all gung-ho at the beginning because it was new and fresh, and it was something other than everybody was just locked in their basement in their bomb shelter and with not a lot to do. And then over time, it gradually kind of fizzled out. And then we've had the roller coaster of and then coming back live on site, and then back onto Zoom, and then live on site. And so we've seen our junior hires, I think, maybe more than I'm not really directly involved with the high school group anymore, but our junior hires, I think, are a little bit more harder to social distance than the high school students. Junior hire is the normal junior hire is just not wired to be socially distant. Mm-hmm. So that's been a bit of an adjustment for them there. But at the same time, at least for our group, I think they've been pretty incredibly flexible with the way things, like, they've been adaptable with it. We've lost a few along the way and gained a couple. But I think by and large, their attitude has been pretty adaptable with it. And mm-hmm. They're much more excited to meet in person. Obviously, I think that would go the same for most of culture, that to meet in person than they are online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good.
I would say for us, our kids are just super excited to try anything new. So I'm like, I have a new game, and they're like, yes! And it literally doesn't matter what it is. Anything new presented to them, even if it's not new, explained in a different way, they're so pumped. And I'm like, this is awesome. They're so excited to just do something. Like it literally doesn't matter what it is or how exciting it is. They just want to do it. And so that's been very encouraging from a planning perspective, because I'm like, even if this game or whatever flops, it doesn't really flop because they're really excited just to do it.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
We've kind of had like a shift in our junior high ministry, which is kind of a neat shift, where when we went online the first time, it kind of just wasn't working out at all, actually. And then we came back in person for a little bit, not very long, but a few weeks. And when we returned online, we actually started to see growth, which was kind of crazy a little bit, because I thought, we're going back to Zoom, like it's going to suck. And I think I was more negative than our students were about the whole process. And we've actually seen like a different side to our students, like a maturity that wasn't there before, where they actually don't really care for the game time. They still want something fun, but they're so invested into learning and growing. And all of our junior highs are like community kids, which is crazy to think that they're wanting to learn and grow. And then now that we're back in person, our junior high ministry has actually grown, which is just kind of crazy to think about, that through a pandemic, we're, our junior highs are growing spiritually, but also we're growing in numbers, which is neat.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. I was just thinking as you were saying that, I'm like, so what are you seeing as far as, like you mentioned that your students, as they come back, they really want to grow, and maybe there's a little less desire for games, and that's not necessarily everybody's experience, and it might not, but what are you seeing, and this is to everyone, but what are you seeing as far as like spiritual disciplines, as far as like whether it's engaging with your videos or reading their Bible or praying or those kinds of things? What are you seeing from these students that way?
So personally, what we've been doing is we used to have like a sermon time, and it just wasn't working. And it wasn't even a long, like it was like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of like teaching. And it just kind of was, you would see them kind of like close their camera on Zoom, or if we were in person, they would kind of just start to buckle down in their seats. And we shifted to more of a small group dynamic. So it's just us sitting in a circle talking. And all I do is I have a scripture and I let them talk about it. And then I've seen that some of the students are like, what was the name of that book again? And so we've been handing out Bibles, and they've been kind of going home and reading more. I kind of give them the page number and I tell them how to read their Bible and what that's like. We've been doing a lot of like basic, like this is how you find this in the Bible. And they've been going home and kind of reading more about it, or wanting to learn what they're reading. And so it's been kind of neat that way.
That's awesome. Yeah. What else have you seen as far as like that spiritual side, as far as like behaviors specifically, like they're reading their Bibles, they're praying, what are you seeing? It can be the opposite too. Like I'm asking what the behaviors are.
Yeah, for us, Wayne, it's been good, but it's been really challenging because I feel like the shift that's taken place that's now happening in the home. And I think it's a good shift and a positive shift, where it forces us and encourages us to partner with parents in a way that maybe I haven't before. I can't speak for anyone else. But I feel like, where students are learning to pray and, increasing that prayer life, they're able to do that with their parents, and we're able to partner with parents by providing, our lessons plans, our notes, topics that we discuss, take home questions that they can talk about. One thing that's been great for us is like a YouVersion like Bible study, super easy. Students are utilizing that, and that's been really cool because it doesn't take too much. It's like a chapter or two a day kind of thing, super simple for students that are readers, and then for students that aren't, they can just do the audio, which we really encourage that. We've really tried to take the stigma away from that, about people just kind of listening to their Bible. So, we'll never use language like read your Bible every day. It's just like, get in your Bible kind of thing. But yeah, for us, it's really just been about those practices and disciplines. It's really taken a different turn where it's more in the home, so it's harder to actually visualize and see. But that really has now challenged us to grow in relationship with parents, where now our leaders are actually the main connection to the family. And so that's been really new, where maybe for some of us, it's been us in the past, where we're the ones who call the parents. We are the ones who know the parents. Now it's their leaders, which the parents have a great response that, they're like, I never even knew my kid had a leader. So it's been really cool, and encouraging that way.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. Go ahead, Sarah.
So we also tried like YouVersion reading plans and stuff like that, like Matt was saying. We found the response wasn't there. It was the leaders were engaged, which I was encouraged by. I'm like, okay, well, it's great that they're doing it, but how do we get the kids engaged and connected with this? Like, is this going to work? So we tried a few different avenues with that, and we just found the engagement wasn't there. So what we started doing, because I just thought like, maybe it's just intimidating, or like what is it that's like stopping that and blocking them from really getting connected in that way? So what we had started doing was we're just going to literally read the Bible together. We're going to start with one chapter. So we started in Mark chapter 1. I said, okay, we're going to stop whenever you hear a word you don't know what it means, or if there's something you've heard that we just read that you didn't know before, like we're going to stop and we're going to talk about it. So like put your hand up, tell us, and let's talk about it. And that response has actually been amazing, and that has been really cool to see. So they have loved that. And then they actually, at the end of the chapter, because I'm like, we're just going to start with one chapter so I don't overwhelm them with like, we're going to read 5 chapters at once. Like, and they were the ones that were like, can we read more? And I'm like, this is awesome. Okay, so this is how we read the Bible. Like it doesn't have to be hard or overwhelming. We can stop, we can talk about it, we can look stuff up. Like this is what you can do at home as well, but let's start together. And so that's been super positive for our group.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember one time when I was pastoring, we come to this one week, we were in a series, and I had selected a passage based on the topic, and instead of, okay, me preparing a sermon with an illustration and the point and the commentary about what the passage meant, I actually just put the passage on the screen and did exactly similar to what you're saying, where I was like, okay, here's our topic, here's what we're talking about. Let's read this passage. What does that say about this? And then getting the students to actually like read it and kind of point out. And it wasn't something that I could have pulled off every week, but on an occasion where it was like, it was probably for me in 7 years in that role was one of the most significant nights, because I'm listening to them talk about what they just read in a passage of scripture. And well, wouldn't this mean that God is with us? And you're like, yes, thank you. And you're like, yay, you're discovering it yourself. And then I always tell people I loved the fact that I was teaching them how to read the Bible without saying, hey guys, I'm going to teach you how to read the Bible. It's like that almost subtle thing. So yeah, that's super awesome. And it's interesting as we try to develop the typical spiritual disciplines that we normally would, right? But obviously our method of communication has to change, and we're doing things differently, right? And so we've talked in a previous call about some of the things, some of the initiatives that we're doing. What I'm interested with this question is what are you seeing as a response from your students? Like what are you seeing as far as the ways you're communicating and how they're responding? And then the follow-up question that we'll talk about slightly after is, how is that engagement forcing you to adapt? So maybe share a little bit about ways you've communicated and what you've seen and what you've noticed that maybe is changing in this time. Come on, that was a really good question. You gotta contribute. Go ahead, Sarah. Just kidding.
So kind of like I just said about YouVersion, like we found it hard to connect with them. Like some of them would have YouVersion or whatever. And so like a few of them would be on stuff, but in a general way of communicating with our kids, it was like, how do we do this? Because some of them are on Instagram, some of them aren't, like just stuff like that. So
Mhm.
we found it very, very difficult to have like one place to communicate,
Mhm.
which is fair. I mean, we can have multiple places and that's fine, but we were still finding like the engagement wasn't there. So I guess I'm kind of stepping into your next question, but what we did was we knew all of them had been on online learning at some point. So I made a Google Classroom for our junior youth group and we invited them all. And that is our place where we have our platform to talk. So we still use it whether we're online or not. And usually at the beginning of the week, I'll post like a question of the week and then they can comment on stuff and they all know how to use Google Classroom. So that was a win already. It wasn't an app that they don't know how to use. It wasn't something that they didn't have. It was very easy to get them to join because they already have an email. They've already used it for school. It's familiar, super easy to use. You can monitor it. You can make sure like comments and everything are appropriate. You can delete whatever you need to delete. Like that has been a win for us. And that was definitely something to adapt for what they already know instead of saying, let's try like this that you don't know about. So that's been good for us anyway.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. I like the even just the creativity to say this is something they're doing because I have, the secret behind all of this. I have an 11-year-old in my house that I'm watching as she's discovered. She's new to junior high, so she's, kind of discovering things and even, not this isn't a criticism, but I love she's been on Google Classroom. If I said join a Google Classroom, she would know how to do that. With our youth group has been doing Zoom, and so I got her set up and I showed her how to do that, which is fine. It's not an issue, but I'm like, I love that concept of I'm going where you're going and I'm where you are. I like that. Anybody else? Just as a side note, you can just like click that raise your hand button and then I can go to you even while somebody else is talking. Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
So back in the fall, we went back to in person, but we had to make it look a little bit different just to make sure that we were adhering to some of the regulations we had here in our area. And so instead of us having our youth group meet all as one together in one room, we actually split it up, which at first I was really struggling with. I didn't really want to do it. And so what happened was we did more of like a rotation kind of based youth night. Where each grade group would basically start in a station and then rotate every half hour. And so I actually got to preach or communicate to students a little bit more specifically to their grade group, which allowed me to make the messages more tailored towards that specific age group, just because, again, speaking to a grade 6 and their life stage is a little bit different than speaking into a grade 8's life stage, right? And so I found good response by that. They were able to have really good conversation within their small group time as well. And so that was something new that we tried that I really liked. And so definitely post-COVID as well, we'll definitely be trying to do more of that. And so, yeah, so that was one thing that we tried. And then when we had to go back to online during the lockdown, we were meeting on a weekly basis over Zoom calls, but we actually I personally did not preach over Zoom, only because just with conversation with students and some of the parents, the students were on Zoom for hours on end with school already. And so the engagement to preach to them over Zoom just wasn't there. And so I actually started just posting messages on our Vimeo page and then sending them out to parents and just sending them a link so that they could have access to all those messages. So students would watch those messages separately. And then on the Zoom call, we'd have more of a fellowship time or, community time with one another, and then also have discussion questions about the messages spoken. And then for those students who weren't able to watch it yet, I just did like a quick recap of what we discussed, and then they were able to join the conversation. So a couple of new things that I tried that I think were, helpful specifically in this time. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I don't know if it's just me. I don't see the like when I click on the little buttons there, I don't see the raise hand feature. I don't know if it's been
okay.
saved.
That's weird because others have it, but you don't.
That away
that's
from
okay.
Us. Well, we've already been trying to think through and tweak some things, like the rest of you guys, I'm sure throughout the course of a year, you're monitoring things in terms of the effectiveness of how you're communicating to youth, the engagement level during activities, small group, preaching, interaction, illustrations, like, whatever it is that you're doing, how you're communicating to parents, social media, online. So COVID's, COVID's been the great adjuster for us all. It's forced us to tweak some areas, probably for a lot of us, like myself, some areas that we wanted to get into experimenting and trying, but just for whatever reason, fear or laziness or whatever, just didn't do it. COVID forced us to. So when we were on Zoom, we did a lot of stuff. Like we did some things like, I don't know if you guys saw Some Good News with John Krasinski.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to, like, just borrow off some concepts from there and get some youth involved with sending us little 10-second video clips about doing the weather, or giving a community response about things that really had nothing to do. It was not helpful information at all. It's just funny. A lot of back and forth. Like I would do like a 5-minute message. Well, I do like a 15-minute message, but I do like 5 minutes. And then they'd go in their breakout rooms, and then be like 5 minutes, or show a video in breakout rooms, and then it'd be some kind of illustration. And so since we've come back live, we've used that kind of format. I don't know post-COVID what that would look like, because right now we're meeting in our auditorium. So we have lots of bells and whistles to play with in there in terms of tech, and lots of space to use. But they're all in their life groups, their small groups throughout the auditorium, and it's big enough that we can social distance and have them all in there. So I can talk to them for a bit, show a video, then they're in their groups, and have like a countdown video, 2 minutes left in your group, and then come and give a little insight interjection. And then they seem to be responding well to that, like rapid fire, 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of there, 5 minutes here, 7 minutes there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as opposed to maybe some of the more linear ways that we would communicate from the stage before for 15, 20 minutes, and then they're in their group for 20, 25 minutes, which for our junior high girls is okay. Our junior high guys, another story for most of them. So we've found that with our leaders, we've been going in this format now for a couple of weeks since we've been back, and we actually have a leadership huddle tomorrow night on Zoom that just to gauge some feedback as to how the leaders think it's working, and that so far it seems like the youth are more engaged. The one drawback is that when everybody's in the room like that, the good thing about Zoom is when you launch the breakout rooms, you can just end it, right? And whether they're done or not, have that 1 minute or 2 minutes or whatever, and then it's like you can control things more.
Mm-hmm.
When everybody's in the same room, the energy level sometimes of the groups, one group's just, they're praying and they're pressing in, and another group are, we're trying to get them to not stand on each other's shoulders, and no, you can't jump off the balcony, guys, get guys, leaders, rein in your group, and
yeah, absolutely. And that's the wonderful joy of in person and junior highs, especially if you give them all that space. Did you want to say something, Matt?
I was just going to add, we're really just trying to tailor communication best to each individual. And so for us, we have a few of our young junior high guys who are gamers, and that's what they love to do. And so we started a Discord, and I knew nothing about Discord, and I still really know nothing. I know that it's just a place where where memes live, and like they just chat on that all day, and I had to mute my notifications because they just won't stop. But some like most of our junior highs aren't on social, so to include follow us on social, or keep your eyes peeled for what's happening, doesn't mean anything for them. Maybe for their parents that might follow us, but we know that Facebook is where our moms group is. We had a student chat, but it quickly turned into a moms group when we invited parents to that chat. So I really connected with Sarah that we were challenged that every student connected different, but that's kind of pressed us to be like, okay, well, we just have to figure out what way we need to connect with everyone. And so for some, it's honestly just as simple as a phone call. One of the biggest needs that most families where we're at had is, hey, it's been like a few months. I haven't got a call yet. And it's like, oh, I've sent you like a million emails, but yeah, I never thought that you want to call too. Like, and so some of them, it's just super simple, a call, a text. Some of them, you know, they've invited us just to their front porch. So it's been unique that way, but it's been really cool because it's, you know, it's a little bit different and, you know, a little bit more personal. But yeah, as we're heading back in person next week, we've actually been a little bit lag behind our area. And so schools have been meeting for a while, but students were still online. And so that's kind of, you know, really presenting all the challenges that, you know, Charles was talking about that we're doing as well. Small groups, kind of rotating, we're doing all that. And it's going well, but yeah, it is challenging us where it's just like, okay, you know, that 30-minute, you know, kind of sermon announcements, that's just not working anymore. Group ministry seems to just be really taking off. And excited for it, but just kind of learning it, just, you know, trying new things, trying new ways to do it, and trying to figure out what works best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else want to weigh on this before I move on? Okay.
I would just add to that, Wayne, about what Matt was saying about like, where youth are and where they're not in social media, is that like we have our Facebook page, which we know, you know, 98% or more is our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an Instagram page for our junior hires that we thought we had more engagement with, that we actually do have decent engagement with, but when I actually looked at it, probably 60 to 70% of the engagement it was leaders and former youth who have graduated out of junior high. So we're in the process now, working with a couple of our junior high teenage leaders that to help us like with developing a TikTok strategy. Is TikTok something that we can and should use to engage with, and developing a YouTube channel? I wonder for communication for you guys, I don't want to prolong the conversation too much, Wayne, but how many of you are using YouTube to live stream or record your services, your youth gatherings, and then how many youth are watching and engaging with a recorded message, like after the fact, if you find if they're even interested in watching something that's already happened at youth? Ours weren't.
Right.
We found ourselves using YouTube, but not only the actual like platform, we started to really change how youth looked. So it wasn't like, you know, like our YouTube is not you know, a sermon, a worship set, a prayer. Like it's really like YouTube-y. There's segments broken down really quick. You know, we did a prank call segment where we prank call parents and leaders, and the kids loved it, and it got views, it got engagement from community, and so that's really the direction that we've taken off. And so I should probably just like include this because it's kind of like our future of what we're doing now. I'm not an athletic person. I'm not sure if anyone I just never really got into watching sports. I could tell that when I cleaned up my Facebook that I set up when I was in high school, and under favorite athlete was Terry Fox. I'm just not, you know, but I appreciate things like Sports Center where it's like, you know, top 10 highlights of the week and stuff like that. And we're doing like what's called the Sunday recap. And that's just going to be like, what did, you know, Pastor Bill talk about this Sunday? You know, what was the message about? And kind of really break it down for students so they can understand. Because it's easy in, you know, big church to use jokes about paying bills or about, you know, you use, you know, different connections that youth don't understand. And so we're really just breaking down the message, but we're doing it as kind of like, you know, Sports Center highlights, you know, we're taking bloopers from the services that week, and we're like zooming in and making memes, and students get to make memes and they get to be a part of that. And so we're doing, like very like YouTube segment style instead of the traditional just worship and preach. And it's great because what I love about that is it's for people who love sports and who are a part of that. And so, you know, it's for the kids who are a part of the Sunday experience, but also for the kids who want nothing to do with Sunday. It's a way to be like, hey, here's the 1 minute sermon, here's highlights. You know, it's all here for you, and it brings them and connects them to what we're doing as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's a great way to engage them, obviously, because it's fair. And I like your question, Sean, because my daughter watches YouTube. She loves YouTube. Like we have rules and restrictions about what she can watch and how often and how long and all of that. But you're like, I can just see her being like, but I'm watching church, Dad. And they're like, fine. You can just see that coming. But yeah, like I like that, going where they are, being what they're into. And even as you're talking about, and I'm not going to advocate for each individual social media or different strategies, but I think the purpose of the question, or the purpose of even talking about it, is what are the ways that you can reach them? Because I think this is probably the biggest shift I've seen. Is we used to think, oh, if you had a Facebook page and an Instagram account, you got them covered. You got your students covered. You're good. I'm like, well, that's not true. And if you're still relying on just those, you're missing a really large amount. And I'm even finding this with youth pastors, and this is just my own little whatever for a little while. You're like, all the time I get, hey, I didn't know that was happening. I'm like, we sent you an email. It's on our Facebook. It's on our Instagram account. It's on our website. Do you want me to call you personally every single time I'm doing something? Sorry, that may get a little, I should take that out of the recording. Anyway, just moving, continuing, and I think this actually adds to that part of the conversation. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you're finding are the influences that students are really becoming a part of. Like, what are some of the newer or more prevalent influences you find in your students' lives during this season? So to give you kind of that simple example so that you can whatever, I recently discovered that my daughter really loves this one YouTuber who paints squishy toys. She goes by Me, or what, those are her initials, I don't even know, but she like gets squishies and she paints them. And my daughter just loves these videos. And so I'm like, oh, interesting. But what are you finding? Not necessarily, hey, what YouTuber are your students watching, but what are you finding as influences that have kind of come out that you're seeing in your students' lives? This is where I need a cricket sound, Nicole.
I'd have to say Tucker Carlson live.
Yeah. I don't know who that is, but that's fine.
Rich got that.
Nice. But are you noticing any shifts? You can say, you know what, I haven't noticed. That's okay. We can move on. But
I can tell you there's a shift away from, like, a lot of our junior high girls, this grade 6 and 7s anyways, over the last year have been all about Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok. And then ever since, some things back and forth there and her family and dynamics and that, I barely hear a peep about her anymore.
Yeah, for my situation, I actually don't find too much of my junior high students, maybe more in the grade 8s, but a lot of my junior high students aren't necessarily using TikTok yet. A lot of my high school students are. And so, yeah, definitely YouTube is a bigger influence within that age category for me specifically, and just the students that I have. And so, yeah, so definitely having, and I think it's grown in this season just because there's not much to do. You're not able to socialize with your friends, and so you end up watching videos and then talking about it with your friends over the phone, or you FaceTime them and stuff. And so it's interesting to see that there's an increase, it seems like, of voices that they do have in their lives more than before. And I guess that's a whole other conversation of, what that even does to one person. But yeah, definitely seen an increase when it comes to the amount of engagement on YouTube. A lot of our conversations over Zoom lately, like during lockdown, has been, what are you watching nowadays, or anything fun that's happened in your week? And it always tends to be, yeah, dude, perfect. Sean is saying in the chat here, there's always a win. But yeah, it does seem to be YouTube for my situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
So our junior highs, their parents don't really let them watch like too much YouTube or do much like social media wise at all. But the one thing they all do is play Among Us. Like, just that's one thing they all do. And if they're allowed to watch YouTube for a little bit, they watch videos on playing Among Us. And so we've kind of done some Among Us youth nights and things like that to incorporate it in, which have been lots of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, for a long time, I would just randomly say to my daughter, like, orange is sus. And that was just a thing because she's all over that as well. Go ahead, Sarah.
I would totally echo Jess with that. They all play Among Us for our group. Also, Roblox is huge, which I had no idea how to play or anything about it before. I still don't. But one thing we started doing, because we know that they are watching YouTube videos about how to play and other people playing it, I got some of our guy leaders to record themselves playing these games, and then we post it. So it's like
Nice.
our own content. I mean, they're not the best at these video games like some people on YouTube, but it's just a way for us to be engaged with them again. So we're just doing our own, kind of, again, meeting them where they're at. They're going to watch these videos anyway. So let's make some like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw Greg had posted in the chat, his group is very Among Us as well. That's awesome. And so what can we I guess maybe the point has been made. You know, it's about adapting and finding out what their influences are and being able to you know, capitalize on that as best we possibly can. So let's shift the focus a little bit. What are you seeing as far as your students' level of devotion to your program? So whether it's maybe that's not fair. Maybe I should say to God, but through your program, because that's probably better. But like we all, at least at one point, whether you had core kids who were like super committed to fringe students who are like, yeah, I show up every once in a while. What are you seeing as far as like shifts or their level of devotion? I'll leave it at that. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm actually like, we're getting a lot of messages from our in-person before COVID hit, the fringe students. We're getting a lot of messages from them that are just very like simple, you know, hey, I can't wait to meet back in person again. I didn't realize how much youth meant to me. And so those are really encouraging, because I feel like for those students, you know, those are the ones that you really want to get through and you really wrestle with, and you go home and they're the ones that make you want to cry the most. Just to, you know, connect with them and you know, have them see what God sees in them. But to receive those messages, you know, it's been awesome. Now it has been really difficult with our core students before. These were the kids, you know, group in the church, parents group in the church. This is what youth was. They don't understand how we can't do it like this and why it can't be the same. And, you know, this is where most of the language, you know, we can't wait to get back to normal. That's where we see it in those students. So we are seeing a shift of what's happening. But I think, again, that's just been kind of like what Charles was saying about our Zoom right now is very community focused. And it's just a great time with the students who maybe felt a little bit more outed before. Now they really feel a part of it. And where more students might have felt comfortable with the program, knowing what was going to happen, you know, knowing that they could go home at this time, like we're really seeing a lot of those fringe students start to come into the inner circle, which has been really cool.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah, somebody else. What are you seeing from your students? Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
So ours, I find like I have like two like ends of the spectrum, where our fringe kids, we basically created a night for them. So once a month we have like a youth night, kind of similar to what Matt was saying, like where it's really YouTube content. There's different segments of the night. And we offer like take home kits. So like supplies for the night, whether it's for games or snacks or a baking segment, sometimes we do. And so those nights are the nights that we get people that maybe weren't super engaged, that were coming to youth maybe just for games and fun. And they engage a lot with that night. For the rest of our group, like that is maybe a bit more core and really a bit more serious about their relationship with God. The rest of the weeks of the month, we do like Zoom calls. We've done YouVersion Bible studies together. And that's where I'm really seeing like the depth coming from, of just like, yeah, I'm serious about God. I'm serious about my relationship with him and growing in that. And so it's really just been like two sides of the spectrum of whether like, yeah, like where some kids are still just wanting to just have fun, and we have something for that. But the ones that are more serious, it's been like really encouraging just to see like how much they are ready to grow in their relationship with God. So yeah, it's just kind of all over.
Yeah, no, I like that, because in some ways, this season really is going to push a student into one of those camps, right? Like it's either going to, COVID has become the great excuse, right? Like oh, I can't. I've probably told many of you this story, and Nicole, it's your story, so I probably shouldn't even share it. But like Nicole was telling me that she went away for her birthday back in the summer, and she went to a hotel, and they're like, oh, the pool closes at 2. I'm like, why does the pool close at 2? And it's like COVID. You're like, because at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, you get COVID in the pool. It's only safe until 2. Like, you're just like, oh, it's just become this excuse that we can use to set new restrictions and new guidelines. And I think it's worked for students that way too, right? Like where it's like, oh, I'm online school all day, so I don't want to go online again, or it's just not, we just don't want to do that, or whatever. It's kind of become that excuse and forced them into one way or the other, for sure. It's good that you believe in science, Matt. I appreciate that. So yeah, absolutely. That's a very fair point. What else? Who else? Somebody else.
Well, I think, I mean, young people in general, not everyone, but I think the vast majority crave community more so than adults, right? Like we can find ways for community, or, you know, those of us that are married and have kids, you've got other things that are occupying your time and attention and responsibilities and work and that. And so, but youth in particular, I mean, they're very tribal by nature and need that community. And I think COVID has maybe awakened the appreciation for that. So the times, you know, then, you know, when we're online and then we're back together, there's that appreciation of being back together. And I think that's something that has worked well. And just that reminder of how important the community is. And there's other ways to meet together. It's not incumbent. The Spirit of God at work in us isn't incumbent on us having to be in the same physical room in proximity together. But there's something very powerful about that we lose sight about. And there's powerful things that happen online. But I think we're created to be in community, and not that this is, some people would say what we're doing is artificial community. I don't believe that, but I believe probably community in its best intent and function is probably when we're together. You can, you know, really look somebody 3-dimensionally in the eyes. You can be there with somebody. Just even, you know, COVID is a little bit risky for, you know, any kind of extended contact, but even, you know, some just still a hand on the shoulder, or just, you know, the elbow pump and stuff like that. Like those are things that are still, I think, craving and needed. And being able to come together in community contexts like that, I think is something that has really helped. And yeah,
that's good. Yeah, go ahead, Matt, and then Jess. I see your hand too, Jess.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like for this season, I feel like, you know, this time has really shown us that we are student pastors of students, not just students who attend our programs. And so for us, I don't know like about you guys, but we're making more calls, we're making more emails, because we're connecting with students who have never come out to one of our programs, where, you know, like in St. Catherine's, like, you know, you are a part of Central Youth, even if you've never been to a Central Youth event or program, where before, you know, that was probably just like, I wouldn't have connected with those students out of, you know, I'm busy, I'm connected with the guys who are actually plugged in, who are, you know, willing to invest and who are, you know, so maybe that was just like an insecurity or like, I don't know what that was, but for us, we've just been super busy contacting everybody now. And that's been really good. It's been really challenging, because you'll get those awkward, you know, phone calls where it's like, oh, I haven't heard from you in 3 years. And it's like, oh, like, cool. But it's awesome. And I think it's a great way to look at ministry and to look at what we do, that we're just a pastor of people, of students, of families, of parents, and you know, not just the people who are connecting to our online Zooms, to our, you know, back in person. And so for us, like, we're really trying not to fall back into that. You know, when we do meet in person, that those are our kids that we connect. We're still trying to reach out, to our community, still trying to reach out, to our kids who attend church that don't attend our youth program, and still trying to really, like what Allison was saying, really, create something for the core that, you're like, yeah, you want to go deeper? That's awesome. Like, I want to encourage you. I want to help you on that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Go ahead, Jess.
I found like when it comes to the like program wise and students coming out, I found that like pre-COVID, we had like the core group of students who came to church and, like would help out, come a little early and set stuff up or whatnot. But then after everything and now I find that our church kids are the ones who are like, oh, I can catch your Instagram devotional. I can watch the Sunday sermon, like on my TV, if I can't make it out to youth. And so I find that they're not as committed to coming, but our community kids are more committed to coming out and not so much as invested into like the Instagram devotionals or the Sunday sermon and catching that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna just go off script here a little bit. To not Jess, but anybody else, why do you think that is? Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think Jess is experiencing that? No, you can't answer, Jess.
I can't answer? Okay.
No, I want other people to weigh in. What do you think? Why do you think this is happening?
I think it might be a little bit of the sense of entitlement that we want to go back to the way that things were before, right? So our familiarity, our comfort level has been disrupted. And so push pause until we're back in that space again.
Yeah, I like that. Anybody else want to weigh in? And then I'll let Jess say what she thinks.
Yeah, I think there might be a different level of hunger as well, and curiosity. With church kids, it's, if they feel like they have all the answers or they feel like they know, I think it's becomes easier to say, well, I already know this story, or I already kind of do this, where kids that just really don't know, they're very curious. And so, yeah, I hate speaking in the other context though. So thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, no problem. No, I wasn't speaking specifically to what do you think is happening with her students, but just that I don't think she's the only one who's had that, and like what would cause that. I think it's worth mentioning as well, like on a typical youth night where you're coming, you're setting up, you're really seeking an experience, whereas an online or even a slightly removed or restrictions, that shifts what your expectations are or what you can. It's that, oh, this isn't what I wanted. It's like if you go to a restaurant and the food is cooked a little more than you like or a little less than you like, you're not going to go back because you're like, it's not what I wanted. And I think there's a little bit of that consumerism, a little bit of that, expectation certainly is a real thing. Jess, why do you think that's happening with your group?
Parents.
Yes.
They are getting really used to not coming to church and watching everything online and feeling like they can get the same thing out of church online as they can in person. And so they're not making, like they used to not have to force their kids to come out. And I'm not saying they should force them to come out either, but I think seeing that their parents are not as invested is just kind of changing their investment as well.
And that's a whole topic. Like we could do a whole conversation on that, right? Like because that's the interesting nature of what we do is we are dealing with people who don't make the decision, or in some cases they might make the decision, but most cases, they have to, I want to do this, Mom, can I do this? Right. And so mom says, no, I don't want to. And especially if you're around in a ministry context long enough and you see that family that's like super committed and then they move kind of farther away, so it becomes a half-hour drive, you'll see over time, oh, they're not here as much. They tend to disappear because it is that, oh, I don't want to drive. And you're thinking, oh, I don't want to do that 4 times a week or 5 times a week. And then it just diminishes and diminishes. And now we're all getting used to, and they've been preached at for a year now. Hey, you can still experience God online. You can still experience him from far away, and you don't have to be here, which we're literally telling them they don't have to be here. Anyway, Matt, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love what you said, Wayne, and I think I don't think this is new. I think I think I learned that students don't actually come to see me. They're coming to see their friends. Like I think, and I think that's across the board. I think parents, I think families, I think churches is community and being together. I think that's one of the drives and one of the most difficulties about this season is that so many people feel apart and distant and alone and isolated. And I feel like this is just highlighting what students actually, and like, yes, they need Jesus. I'm not, they need that experience and they need to know that God loves them. But they're in need of community. And I think there is such a hunger. I really believe kind of, that this is going to open up doors in ways that were, like, I don't know if like, down the road, man, I don't know if like door-to-door ministry is going to reopen because like people are just like, yeah, get in my house. I just need I need to talk to somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we're like, this is going to cause some incredible things in the future because of just a hunger for a relationship. And it's that hunger for a relationship that opens up doors spiritually. So like, I know, like I could bet that everyone here was very connected to their kidsmen, children's men, youth men, like whoever. You were connected to somebody, and that connection got you to where you are. Whereas somebody who just, had an awesome opportunity at camp, a spiritual moment in their life that felt disconnected, those are the people that usually disappear and fall off the rails.
Yeah, the thing I would say is it's about that experience and then pushing them into a community. Pushing is maybe the wrong word, but it's like, yeah, that support around. Absolutely. Our time is basically gone, so I don't want to keep going. I did have one more question that I'm going to give you, not to discuss, but just to think about. That was kind of the last thing I was hoping we'd get to, is just based on what you're learning from students, what are some new concepts or things that you are doing differently to reach those students where they're at? And I'd be interested in hearing your answers, but I'd also just even be interested in you thinking about that. And what am I doing? And it's come up through our conversation, so I don't feel like we have to keep talking about it, but I wanted to kind of share that with you a little bit. And so that's kind of it. Thanks so much for being here. I do have a couple of announcements and things that I just wanted to mention. Somebody made a joke about Facebook being for old people, and I totally get that. Because it's literally my life on Facebook is memories, seeing old stuff, and then communicating with my parents. Like, that's essentially the only place they communicate. So it is that. However, having said that, that's like the worst introduction to this ever. But one of the things that's really important for us at Student Collective is we wanted to create a space where we could actually communicate on a regular basis with specifically middle school or junior high ministry in mind. And so we've actually created a Facebook group. I know it's Facebook, but we've created a group which will be a kind of a, I'm going to get the words wrong. It's going to be, it's not public so that other people see what's in it. So I think it's closed. It's not private in the sense that you couldn't find it, but it's closed in the sense that you have to be able to come in or ask to be invited. But you will all be invited to that later if we can find you on Facebook. And the purpose of that, just so you know, is specifically just to share as you're sharing ideas or thoughts or posing questions, that kind of thing, that we wanted to create a space where we could come together and actually have these conversations on a regular basis, specific to middle school. We have one for high school and one for young adults as well, which I realize for some people means 3 groups, but it's the easiest. I also wanted to mention, if you haven't already, you should definitely check out the Level Up Leadership videos that we've created. If you go to studentcollective.ca, you can see them there. You can't see them there. You can purchase them there and find out more information about who's talking and those kinds of things. And you can actually purchase them, as Nicole thankfully just put into the chat, studentcollective.ca/purchase. These are 11 videos put together by 11 different speakers that are specific to ministry in 2021. So we're talking about the topics that I think are very relevant to what you're dealing with. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about, we had Dave Slater do a topic about like how to talk to the crazy conspiracy theory people in your church, because you know they're there, and just different things like that. Like, we're trying to be a resource for you, for children and family ministries, as well as other areas as well. Also, Nicole's going to post a link here. If you haven't already, we're really finalizing what we're doing with Overflow this year. We have some options, but I want as much feedback as I can possibly get. So on that link right there, which says Overflow Youth Conference 2021 at the end, if you haven't filled out that survey yet, please take it. I promise you it'll take you less than 5 minutes. Please fill that out so that I can get some feedback to help us make the right decision as far as what to do going forward for Overflow. Lastly, coming up in April, we will be doing another Zoom call. It won't be a discussion, but we'll be doing another Zoom call. And then coming up in May, we're actually going to do what we would typically do for our forums. We're going to do that via Zoom for May coming up, and you'll see more information about that. You should be following us on our social media stuff, Instagram, the website, studentcollective.ca, and our Facebook page.